How does a team from Norway completely destroy the most recent UEFA Champions League finalists? Bodø Glimt, a small team from Northern Europe, has beaten top European giants like Atletico Madrid and Manchester City, and most recently they knocked out Inter Milan from the UEFA Champions League. Their style of play allows them to break down deep defensive low blocks and score a lot of goals. But that's not the only secret behind their success. Their tactic is also flexible. Rumor has it that Bodø Glimt goes through military psychological training to prepare themselves for big, impossible games. But their unique brand of football reveals a secret behind their success. So how does Bodø Glimt break down deep defensives? And why do they need 3 different formations when they're playing out of possession? Let's find out in this video. Now, all of this tactical brilliance doesn't happen by accident. It starts with the man in charge, Kjetil Knutsen. Since taking over Bodø Glimt in 2018, this Norwegian tactician from Bergen has built a relentless possession-dominant identity around a fluid 4-3-3, extreme positional rotations, and intelligent overloads that create chaos even against the very best defenses. Knutsen has led Bodø Glimt to multiple Eliteserien titles and turned the tiny Arctic club into a European giant killer. Most recently, they knocked out Inter Milan from the Champions League, winning 3-1 at home and also winning 2-1 at the San Siro, completing a 5-2 aggregate victory in the 2025-2026 UEFA Champions League knockout phase playoffs. His philosophy emphasizes short passing control, high intensity pressing when the moment is right, and fearless belief in big games. Backed by a deep culture that includes innovative mental training from former pilot Bjørn Mansverk, the very military psychological edge that helps players stay composed under pressure. But that rumored military psychological training isn't just a tough guy boot camp. It's the brainchild of Bjørn Mansverk, a former F-16 fighter pilot and Royal Norwegian Air Force squadron leader with combat missions over Afghanistan and Libya. Since joining Bodø Glimt in 2017, Mansverk has brought fighter pilot mental techniques into the dressing room, daily group meditation in full training kit, just like they did in flight suits before missions, one-on-one sessions to remove stigma around mental health, and ruthless focus on process, concentration, and staying calm under impossible pressure. Players no longer fear big European nights. They execute Knutsen's tactics with total clarity. That mental edge is exactly why they can walk into the San Siro, switch formations on the fly, and knock out big teams like Inter Milan without blinking. Now, Bodø Glimt expressively set up in a 4-3-3 in most of their games. It's a formation that works really well for possession football. In this shape, Patrick Berg sits as a defensive midfielder, anchoring and protecting the back four, which includes Fredrik Sjøvold, Odin Bjørfot, Johnston Gunderson, and Fredrik Andre Bjørkan. Ahead of Patrick Berg is Hakon Evgen Sondre Brunstad Fett. They operate as 2 roaming central midfielders, while Kasper Ho leads the line as the lone striker, flanked by 2 wingers/inverted wingers, Jens Peter Haig on the left-hand side and Ole Didrik Blomberg on the right-hand side. With 2 central midfielders and 1 defensive midfielder protecting the back four, Bodø Glimt has enough players in the center of the pitch. However, the 4-3-3 has one glaring weakness. The formation uses 1 striker, and if the opponent defends in a low block, the striker can get isolated and easily outnumbered by defenders. From the opponent's point of view, this can be very easy to defend against. To deal with this, Bodø Glimt adopts a unique brand of possession football, using quick short passes to break through the opponent's defense. While the aim is to actually break through the opponent's defense and score a lot of goals, they are patient in their ball movement in the sense that they move it from side to side more times than you would normally see until they actually find an opening. They have a big edge at home. The Aspmyra Stadium uses an artificial pitch. Installed in 2006 and officially UEFA approved, it makes the ball travel faster and truer, enabling quicker one-touch exchanges between players, sharper turn, and harder to defend passing. Players like Bjørkan note the ball going really fast, helping bypass presses and create chaos in tight spaces. It's not the only secret, however. Bodø Glimt have gone on to adapt in other grass pitches abroad. However, their home ground amplifies their play style, and often opponents struggle to adjust to this style of play, especially in Arctic conditions. To simulate this effect on Football Manager, you will want to choose the short passing with fairly high tempo, allowing your team to move the ball quickly, but also encouraging them to maintain control of the match and not be too wasteful by taking unnecessary risk with their passing. In the Norwegian Eliteserien, Bodø Glimt rarely drop below 60% possession. averaging about 61 to 63% possession in most of these recent seasons. However, in the Champions League, they did drop to 48.5% average possession against most of the bigger teams, and they still dictate the tempo of the game using those pace and short passing. They have about 83.3% pass accuracy while completing about 158 successful dribbles. Bodø Glimt even go as far as playing the ball backwards to the goalkeeper if there is no clear opening, and during their build-up, they use a wide back four to try to bypass the press. This is harder for the opponent to try and recover the ball with high pressing. When the fullbacks receive the ball, they can actually choose to either cut inside if the opponent covers the wide areas, knowing that they have the numbers in the center to actually receive the ball and continue the build-up. Fullbacks like Fredrik Sjøvold and Fredrik Andre Bjørkan, these players read the game well in real time. This is drilled to the players in training. And in Football Manager, you can actually do this with either wingbacks or fullbacks, but you have to adjust it during matches. If you notice that the opponent is kind of weak in the middle, you can ask your fullbacks to cut inside with the ball. Or if you're playing against the congested midfield like a diamond 4-4-2, you can ask your fullback to run wider with the ball. Bodø Glimt spends most of their time in the opponent's half, and this affects their attacking width, as many teams tend to sit in a low block and defend in numbers. This narrow attacking creates a congested penalty area for the opponent, making it harder for that deep defense to actually deal with Bodø Glimt's attacks. And to make things worse for the opponents, they cross the ball from the half spaces, causing even more chaos. Narrow width invites overloads in theory, but Bodø Glimt counter it with smart pressing traps and transitions. They force opponents out wide, marking the central areas and blocking those passes to the center, then recovering quickly with counter pressing. They win the second balls and launch immediate vertical counter-attacks. In the Champions League this year, they've excelled in defensive transitions, using narrow shape to keep numbers centrally and limit the spaces in behind. To simulate Bodø Glimt's narrow attack in Football Manager, you can adjust your team's attacking width to fairly narrow or much narrower, depending on the intensity that you desire. However, there's still a problem of the lone striker who could get outnumbered by opposition defenders. To help out the isolated striker Kasper Høeg, this is where your central midfielders actually come in. Håkon Evjen and Sondre Brunsten Fert, Bodø Glimt's roaming central midfielders, or roaming number 8s like I like to call them, they have total freedom to actually surge vertically or drift horizontally. They crash the box waiting for cutbacks, and they also help out the wingers and even carry the ball through the center, aiming to drag defenders out of position. In Football Manager, there are a number of roles you can actually use here. If you're playing the older versions of the game, you can use a Medala. You can also use a central midfielder on attack duty, asking them to move into channels and also take a lot more risk. However, in the modern versions of the game, you have to use a central midfielder, a box-to-box midfielder, or even an attacking midfielder in the central midfield position, and also remember to still give them those instructions to move into channels, take a bit more risk, and also make forward runs. Patrick Berg is going to stay deeper as the anchor or defensive midfielder to actually hold the shape so everything doesn't just fall apart. Since the opponent defends deep in a low block, Bodø Glimt has different ways to actually break them down. In addition to their short passing, quick passing, Bodø Glimt also likes to dribble a whole lot. They carry the ball into the areas, into the half spaces, even through the center. UEFA stats back this up. They've recorded over 116 runs into the attacking third and 51 runs into the penalty area, while completing most of their 113 crosses from the half spaces rather than the touchline that they would normally expect crosses to come from. They kind of turn the opponent's box into complete chaos. Their two wingers take dribbling to an unprecedented level. Jens Peter Høeg on the left-hand side and Ole Didrik Blomberg on the right-hand side both cut inside aggressively from wide areas. Jens Høeg is especially lethal when he slices towards the penalty spot. Now that's just the beginning. Because of the opponent's stationary, deep, low block defense, Bodø Glimt also asks their central midfielders to get involved in dribbling. They also carry the ball through the center like we mentioned, aiming to entice the opponents to get dragged out of position so they can find space and play a through ball to someone else to finish. I recommend adding dribble more instruction to both your wingers, that's Høeg and Blomberg, and also to Evjen, Brunsten, Fred. These are the central midfielders, and of course the fullbacks as well. They also get involved in dribbling. And if you have a pacey mobile striker in your team, go ahead and ask him to also dribble more. However, remember that dribbling stretches opponents' defenses, so when Bodø Glimt's attack is fully developed, their fullbacks also contribute to dribbling. And when spaces open up, they play passes to players that are in the center. At this point, they have enough bodies in the box that are good recipients for the crosses that will be coming in. Now, you don't have to force the cross more often instruction for most of your players. You can just choose low crosses. And when your players find themselves in these positions, in these dangerous positions, they will go for a cutback. They will square the ball sometimes. Now, Bodø Glimt's tactic is not pure tiki-taka. They kind of have a mix of possession with explosive counterattacks. Against low blocks, they will probe patiently and play short passing, also dribble along the way. But once they win the ball very high or they win the ball in transition, they accelerate vertically and with diagonal switches. They overload the opponent with runs from midfielders and wingers and also go for direct counterattacks. Kjetil Knutsen, their manager, actually demands offensive transitions as well. They do this with intelligent off-the-ball runs, create overloads, and they also bypass the opponent's press with diagonal balls rather than just straight long balls. So in Norwegian League Eliteserien, they kind of rely on their possession-based style of play. However, in the Champions League against the Champions League elites, Bodø Glimt know that counter-attack is key. Now, with so many players contributing to the attack, Bodø Glimt can sometimes be left exposed at the back. So how do they defend properly and concede very few goals? Out of possession, Bodø Glimt continued their dominance of the center. They recover 42.2 balls per game on average in the UEFA Champions League, forcing opponents wide where their narrow back four and also two defensive midfielders can start to pounce. It works for Bodø Glimt to actually cover the center because they have a lot of players in there. They have about 3 central midfielders protecting that central zone. Even though they use a wide back four when playing out of defense, Bodø Glimt uses a much narrower back four when they are out of possession, with their fullbacks sitting narrower and closer to the central defenders. Sjovold and Bjørkan actually combine with the centre halves on the defensive midfielder to form a block of 6 players to defend the centre. However, this will not work 100% of the time. If the opponent has deadly wingers and fullbacks, Bodø Glimt blocks passes to the wide areas and force the play to the centre where they know they have a lot more players that can actually press and win the ball. Now, even though they set up in a 4-3-3 in possession, Bodø Glimt have 3 different formations when they're out of possession. Their first option is the 4-1-4-1 system. Now, this is the natural out of possession shape that fits the 4-3-3. With this shape, the transition from in possession to out of possession is pretty seamless. Players can easily adjust and take very good defensive positions when they lose the ball. However, because of the lone striker, Bodø Glimt sometimes don't have enough numbers up front to hassle the opposition and win the ball. To deal with this, they adopt a high pressing system, committing more players into the attack, into the final third, so that when they do lose possession of the ball, so they can have enough numbers up front to force the press. This way, the striker isn't always isolated out of possession. This approach works well against most teams. However, against a team playing with 2 defensive midfielders, Bodø Glimt switched to their second out of possession formation. In this shape, the striker has defensive cover from one of the central midfielders that moves into the attacking midfield position. The second central midfielder joins the defensive midfielder to form a double pivot. If Bodø Glimt's press fails to win possession of the ball, the 2 defensive midfielders sit closer to the centre backs to create a defensive cage, trapping the opponent's attacking midfielder or supporting striker. This cage of 4 players and the 2 fullbacks combine to form a defensive block of 6 players protecting the center of the pitch, making it harder for teams to actually break them down. This forces opponents to go out wide and resort to playing crosses from wide areas. And to be honest, these crosses are one of the key weaknesses in Bodø Glimt's tactical plan. They try to deal with this by pressing more urgently on the wings and trying to stop crosses, but sometimes it doesn't always work. Now, some opponents like to shape up in the back 3. Against a team like Inter Milan, who traditionally play a back 3, Bodø Glimt switches to a 4-4-2 formation out of possession. This is their 3rd formation out of possession. This offers the opportunity to press the opponent's backline of 3 defenders using 2 strikers instead of 1. It also gives Bodø Glimt extra defensive solidity, having 2 blocks of 4 players. Their shape is more structured this way and they force teams to the flanks the same way they would normally do in the other 2 formations. The central midfielders are closer to the centre backs, offering that extra protection of the centre. To recreate this in Football Manager, you can go for pressing traps that actually ask your team to force the opponent outside. You can use the wide covering central midfielder and pressing central midfielder as your 2 out of possession central midfield roles. In the back 4, you can use normal fullbacks and normal centre backs. And you can use a normal centre forward role for the striker and normal winger roles for the 2 wingers. Now, Bodø Glimt's out of possession formation switch is not always random. It kind of depends on the team that they're playing against. Knutsen decides pre-match or at halftime based on scouting, but the players adapt intuitively mid-game through drilled triggers like opponent's formation recognition. While Bodø Glimt adopt a high press in most of their games, they are comfortable sitting in a mid to low block when they are defending against bigger teams. Bodø Glimt's defensive line height changes by the opponent. In the Norwegian League against the weaker sides, they tend to push high and press with an aggressive press and also try to win the ball early. However, against big UEFA Champions League teams like Atletico Madrid and Man City and Inter Milan, they drop into a mid-block, sitting deeper and more compact to try and stay organized and also limit the space through the middle. They kind of force the opponent out wide and force them to play backward passes. Now once the ball goes backward either to a defensive midfielder, a defender or even a fullback, that's their trigger. Bodø Glimt immediately start to press. The whole team pushes up together to press the receiver of the ball hard and they try to win the ball back. This mid-block worked perfectly at the San Siro. They soaked up a lot of pressure, dealt with Inter Milan's crosses, well, few of the crosses, and they punished Inter Milan's defensive mistakes, particularly the one from Manu Akanji. In Football Manager, you can set a mid-block defensive line and also use to press more often. You can also take it a step further by applying opposition instructions to an opposition defender. So Bodø Glimt has showed us that it's possible to combine a fluid 4-3-3 base formation with 3 adaptive out-of-possession formations, also playing with attacking narrow with short passing possession football that is quick and very difficult to defend against. Combined with intelligent fullback decisions, relentless dribbling, and also a mental framework that turns big games into a routine, Bodø Glimt has become one of the most exciting teams to watch in Europe right now. Their patient build-up sometimes flips into vertical counterattacks, and the moment space opens up, they're amplified at home by a fantastic artificial pitch and they can actually tear teams apart. In Football Manager, most tactics end up feeling samey. Same high press, same rigid roles, same predictable patterns. Bodø Glimt's approach is quite different and it rewards experimentation. Try varying your out-of-possession formations once in a while, vary your team's pressing triggers, tweak your fullback's behavior mid-match, dial up your mid-block or even use a high press and then later switch to a mid-block and a low block. Try to turn on the trigger press for a defender to allow your team to press when the opponent actually plays the ball backwards. You can also encourage individual players in your team to dribble with purpose. I know it's been a while I've done this, but you can download a tactic file in the description for this Bodø Glimt's tactic. You can load it up in your save and test it out and see how you feel. Remember to make tweaks and adjustments based on what you learned from this video. And you can share your results and experience with me in the comments. Now if you want to take this a step further and go a bit relational, watch this next video about how to build a relationism tactic in Football Manager.